Look, everybody loves Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's pretty much the perfect cartoon. The show is critically acclaimed and loved by the masses, but I'm not sure it's exactly the same case for its sequel show, The Legend of Korra. In fact, in all honesty, Korra is a pretty controversial show. And now that it's finally on Netflix, I began seeing questions pop up all over the internet from new Avatar fans saying, is Korra good? Should I watch Korra? And I think that's a really valid question to ask. So with Korra now being on Netflix and Avatar as a whole recently having a massive resurgence, I think it's time we look at all of the criticisms Legend of Korra gets to see how valid and true they really are. Especially since we've had a few years to sit with the show since it ended. We're gonna run through all the major criticisms of the show and give our thoughts and opinions with evidence from the show itself. So without further ado, let's answer the question, was Korra really that bad? Let's start with one of the biggest complaints people had about the show, our favorite air nomad Aang. Specifically the gripe of Aang being a bad father. Now look, there's one thing I know we can all agree on. Aang is swole as f***. Oh my god. Aang became a Chad, jeez. But was he a good father? Now look, in the original series, Aang is kind of like this beacon of hope, this perfect person. He didn't even kill the Fire Lord, who everyone, including his past lives, pretty much told him deserved to be killed. Aang really doesn't have a bad bone in his body. So of course he'd be a great father, but Korra was like, not really. It's complicated. In the show, it is not subtle that Aang definitely favored Tenzin over his other two children, Bumi and Kaya, due to Tenzin's airbending ability. Yeah, that kind of makes sense to me. Look, Aang is great, but he's not perfect. And he isn't gonna be the picture-perfect adult we all imagine from watching him at 12 years old. He didn't even hit his angsty phase yet. And it's hard to remember that because he acts so adult in the show. But yeah, I mean, he's really only 12 years old. He's barely a teenager. Puberty changes you, man. On top of that, this just seems like a natural thing that he would do no matter how hard he tried to be fair. Tenzin can airbend. Aang was the last airbender. Bumi can't even bend, well, until season 3. A little late for that, though. And Kaya can waterbend, so obviously she's gonna be closer to Katara. Also, Aang grew up without parents. Literally, like an orphan. And not even just an orphan who had to save the world. I'm surprised he's not more screwed up than he is, in all honesty. If anything, it just shows he's human. He didn't make a conscious effort. Can you blame him for being so invested in Tenzin? Do we not remember the end of the 3rd episode of The Last Airbender where he found the bones of his people? Honestly, I'm surprised he only had 3 kids. One of the biggest complaints I have seen, especially with the show recently, is that Toph became a cop. And yeah, I understand, this did not age well. Not to involve personal politics, but considering this channel is run by an African-American man, a college art student, and a Native American, we're not exactly pro-cop. But this is true, Toph is probably the most shocking adult version of any OG character to original fans. In the show, after Republic City was formed, she was appointed to the first ever chief of police position. Toph is not only a cop, but created her own division of police that specialized in metal bending. Now look, this decision has always been controversial to fans, but now more than ever, for obvious reasons. But similarly with Aang, the outrage and critique to this development always felt surface level. Though like with any conversation, there are great points to make. Look, again, Toph was 12 in The Last Airbender. She wasn't gonna stay the same forever, no matter how much of a rebellious rule breaker she was as a kid. You want someone to hold you to the same standards you were when you were 12 at your current age, especially in your 30s and 40s like Toph was? I don't even have memories from when I was 12. That part of my life is just blank. Let's not forget also, Toph came from a family of wealth and privilege, something she wasn't all that excited about. That likely influenced her decision because she already knew from just living life as a child how imbalanced the world was, how someone can be born into luxury and be pampered every step of the way, while others have to work day and night just to make ends meet. Not to mention events in the original series like Ba Sing Se probably woke her up to the reality of how deceitful enforcement can be, and as a result, wanted to make sure she ran a system that actually benefited everyone, punished fairly, and didn't abuse their power. She had a very unique position and perspective that shouldn't be understated or misconstrued. Keep in mind, however, this is how she probably felt going into the job. However, Toph didn't stay a cop at all. She knew the system was corrupted, she was brought on to maintain balance and knew that wasn't happening, and even bent the rules herself for the sake of her child after Suyin resisted arrest from Lin. We don't know what else she could have witnessed leading up to the moment of her resignation, but I imagine things only got uglier on the streets, causing her to become disillusioned with what she thought this job would be versus how it all shook out. After it was all said and done, she eventually left to travel the world and became a swamp hermit, returning to her roots, but maintaining the wisdom she gained over the years. Was Toph becoming a cop an amazing development? No, but it wasn't meant to be. It was supposed to be Toph taking accountability and wanting to make a difference, only to realize that even something young like Republic City can create a flawed force that doesn't truly serve the people, that there's too many personal interests and agendas involved to ever truly be fair and equal. Pardoning Suyin and tearing up her police report was evidence of that, not just to the audience, but to herself. Real quick, here's a word from our sponsor. Remember that episode of OKKO where the bodega got hacked and the characters were transformed into terrifying CGI abominations? You know what could have done them a solid in that moment? Today's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. Look guys, the internet knows a lot about us. No matter how much we keep quiet, it's important to keep ourselves safe. Luckily, Surfshark encrypts your private information and protects your online presence, while making your time on the internet better in the process. You can access geo-restricted content by making it look like you're in another country, giving you the keys to the goods you couldn't watch otherwise. I'm talking Rick and Morty on Netflix, baby! Its HackLock ID protection system alerts you anytime your email and password are compromised or leaked. Not to mention the VPN's blind search tool has 0 ads and no tracking. To really put things into perspective, you know how you can be thinking about something with your friends and family, and the next thing you know there's an ad for it as soon as you open your phone? That's called targeted ads. It's a great example of how your online data is pitted against you, and Surfshark can give you a great level of resistance to this. Surfshark is also completely unlimited. You can access it on pretty much all platforms, no limit on the number of devices that can be logged in at once. Go to surfshark.deal/roundtable and enter promo code ROUNDTABLE for 85% off and 3 extra months free, with a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk if you're unsatisfied. Nothing to lose. Again, that's surfshark.deal/roundtable and enter promo code ROUNDTABLE. Let's get back to the video. Then there's the complaint of just how the original Avatar cast appears in general. Now, a lot of people are upset that the original cast members, the ones who are still kicking it at least, people like Katara, Zuko, and Toph, never really shared a lot of screen time. They don't really have big roles in the series in general, to be honest, only being sought out when they need help. Zuko and Toph did have pretty heavy roles later in the series, which was cool to see, but some fans just weren't satisfied. My personal hot take with this complaint is that I don't think that they should have had a big role in the series at all. That's right, I'm just gonna say it. Look, Korra is not the original series. It's a whole new world and a whole new time on a whole separate journey. Having Zuko and Toph still out and about living the same events, to me at least, cheapens the feeling of a whole new generation that I think Korra had to its advantage. It's a brand new journey with a brand new avatar and brand new friends, but also Zuko can help if he wants. Also, Toph is still here. The fact that she can just go to Zuko for help, it just feels too easy to me. Not only that, but if this show truly took place after all of the original cast did die, then their status as legends would be so much more prominent. It would be Korra staring at like a mural of the original cast being like, what do I do? I think that'd have a lot more impact than Toph's still alive, she's in the woods, you know what I mean? It's just like how 2 of the Beatles are still alive. It's just confusing. Now I understand not everyone's gonna agree with this. In fact, maybe nobody will. This could end very badly for me. But I think the bottom line is I really wanted this to feel separate from Avatar, and I still loved seeing the original Avatar cast. It was so cool seeing the older versions of the characters, and I think there's something to be said about them going from the kids who needed help from their elders to being the elders themselves guiding the new Avatar through their journey. That's so cool. And come on, I mean, what Avatar fan doesn't want to see Zuko again, or Toph, or Katara? I won't use the word fan service, but it's something that all fans would want to see, so I understand people's gripes that maybe they're not a big enough role. But that's the thing, that balance made some fans unhappy. They still exist in the show and they're still alive, but they're definitely not a part of the main cast. It's kind of one foot in, one foot out in my opinion. Although I don't think it's that big of a deal, I can see where people are coming from. This is a big one, the new origin for bending. Look, this is a classic midichlorian situation. Bending is so cool and mystical, and the original series kind of explained how bending worked, well they alluded to it at least, but then Korra kind of retconned that lore. In the original series, it was very clear and explained multiple times that the original benders were the animals, and the animals taught humans how to bend. The sky bison taught the air nomads airbending, those mole things taught earthbending, dragons taught firebending back when those were a thing, and in my opinion, this was the coolest way to explain it. It made sense, it deepened the lore of the show and the culture of the show, and Avatar's animals are one of the coolest part of the series, so it was cool that they had such an important role in Avatar's history. But then Korra was like, nah, psych. They did this by revealing one of the biggest things in the entire Avatar world, the origin of the first Avatar. Now, I'm just gonna say, kudos to them for trying to do this, because this is a pretty daunting task. Korra revealed that in the before times, the lion turtles gave bending to humans, mainly to hunt and to forge, but they had to give it back. Until Avatar 1 shook things up, refusing to give back the power, some stuff happened, you found Rava, you became the Avatar, the rest is history. And like I said, kudos to them for revealing this part of the lore, because there's a lot of pressure here. And that just boils down to the fact that, guys, things are always cooler as a mystery. I spent years of my life wondering who the first Avatar was and what that looked like. When I saw it, I was disappointed. Not because they did a bad job or told a boring story, but because it just couldn't live up to the expectations I built in my head. A mystery will always be more interesting than an actual explanation because your imagination is always bigger than the truth of the situation. Same goes here. The ambiguousness of humans learned from animals how to bend causes you to speculate and think and doesn't handhold you the whole time. But this was just a textbook explanation of how it happened. And it's a cool story, it really is. I'm not sure if I entirely like the whole there's a good spirit and a bad spirit thing. I think it's kind of corny, but it was really interesting to learn the origin of the first Avatar. But it will never be as cool as seeing that line of past lives that just faded off in the distance. It's like you don't even know how many Avatars there were. You're never gonna know, man. There's so many Avatars we don't even know about. Where did the Avatar get this awesome power? Why are they reincarnated? All of those things were way cooler when I was just imagining and wondering than when I saw it happen. On top of that, yeah, they did basically give a new origin to bending. And I can see people being upset with that, because if they didn't like Korra or the show in general, then they probably wouldn't be too happy with it going and messing with the original series as well. And I can already hear the comments now. I know the lore is technically the same, and learning from animals is still officially in the history of Avatar, but my point with this is that changing or defining the lore in any way still has an impact on the show in the long term. This one's tough, but I see where fans are coming from here. Another problem people had was just the insane advancement of technology from the original series to Korra. And this one is actually pretty interesting. So look, many people found Korra's steampunk 1920s aesthetic completely unbelievable, and they're not that off. People just thought that the jump from technology and culture was simply too far for one lifetime. I mean, Katara, Zuko, and Toph are literally still alive. That's a lot to happen in one lifespan. Not to mention the fact that Avatar's original world was so deeply rooted in Eastern cultures. It was like the least American thing ever. So for them to turn around and be like, never mind, they made New York, felt like this weird cultural Americanization that wasn't necessary. But I don't entirely agree with that. Let me explain. Although the Avatar universe has its own timeline, and technically took place between 99 and 100 AG, the general consensus is that mirrored with our world, Avatar The Last Airbender takes place during the late 1800s. And honestly, when I first read that, that caught me off guard. I was like, no way. But the more I thought about it, the more it actually added up. Look, there is an impressive amount of technology already in The Last Airbender. From the Fire Nation Zeppelins to the massive Ba Sing Se drill, we are witnessing the start of industrialization. A majority of the Avatar world doesn't have this technology, but that makes total sense too. I mean, a majority of the four nations still consist of small villages and towns, not bustling metropolises. That's because the world as we know it was changed forever with the development of industrialization. Something that was just starting in Avatar and is absolutely booming in Korra. In our world, before industrialization, the world was a lot like the four nations. Technology didn't progress nearly as fast, and culture was more rooted in deep tradition rather than generational change. After industrialization, though, everything was different. Technology began improving exponentially. Just imagine how much our world changed from 1901 to 2000. That amount of change was just not possible before industrialization came along. The world of factories and mass production and highways and even the internet. Our lives are completely different from our grandparents, even our parents. And our kids will grow up in a world completely different than we did. A world we can't even imagine yet. But before that, this was just not the reality. Your dad was a farmer, and you were a farmer, and your kid was gonna be a farmer, and so on. And this is mirrored in the Avatar world. In fact, Korra is just the first example. Look how different the world Korra grew up in was compared to the world Aang did. But Aang was able to literally skip 100 years without generally missing a beat. I mean, think about it. It's not like Aang hopped out of the iceberg and was like, whoa, what is this technology? I don't understand it. But in a little over 70 years, the world of Korra is completely indistinguishable from the four nations when we first meet them. And not just the technology, but the culture as well. This technology jump is crazy, but it's not unrealistic. And personally, I think the aesthetic is so cool. I think the idea that they built a city of the four nations makes total sense. And I'm not gonna lie, the world of Korra to me is a little bit more interesting than the world of Avatar. Because in Avatar, it's just like there's a dictator. But Korra is like there's a council, and there's evil politics, and technology is expanding. To me, that's just one of the coolest parts of the series. And would you want it to be set in the same exact world? That would be boring. Personally here, I feel like Korra aces it. One of the biggest critiques fans had was that Korra chose seasonal stories as opposed to an overarching one. And narratively, the biggest difference between The Last Airbender and Korra is that The Last Airbender had a singular focused storyline, and its goal was clear from the beginning. Aang had to master all four elements and defeat the Fire Lord by the end of the summer. Korra, on the other hand, essentially has a new storyline every season with no clear goal in sight. It's a show that has, well, seasonal stories. You don't know what to expect for the endgame when starting up the series for the first time. Naturally, this has invited a lot of critiques over the years from people that feel as if Korra is more, quote, sloppy in its structure and innately weaker than its older sibling. But I would argue that's not really a weakness in Korra due to the nature of its production. They actually made a great call by sticking to this format. Some people may not know this, but Book 1 was originally intended to be a standalone miniseries. The 12 episodes centered around Korra trying to get a grip on the alarming situation between the Equalists, Benders, and Amon. But it was obvious this return to the Avatar universe would be successful and lead to fans craving more, leading to another 3 books to be picked up. Because of this, while the creators could have made an attempt to continue the Equalist storyline and have it evolve into a larger narrative on its own, I don't think fans would have been satisfied with that approach either, as it would have felt forced. What, are we going to see an Amon impersonator who happened to still be voiced by Steve Blum? On the other hand, they could have attempted to tell a singular cohesive story through books 2 through 4, but then book 1 would have been alienated, sticking out like a sore thumb. While in a perfect world, Korra would have been greenlit for all 4 books from the jump and then provided a strong overarching narrative, I think the show benefited from its seasonal approach. There were no more elements to learn, and the time crunch of the world being at stake was non-existent. It made sense to tackle the smaller scale issues, but still serious issues nonetheless, that haunt this new society, and assigning a conflict for each season, everything being connected through aftermath and character arcs, allows the audience to be fully immersed into each conflict without being distracted by the bigger picture, besides the fact that Korra is the Avatar and has to deal with the problems of the world. The Last Airbender, for example, had a lot of smaller conflicts, but they were harder to fully absorb when we knew the biggest deal at the end of the day was the showdown between Aang and Ozai. Being the Avatar requires providing balance to the world, and you typically can't do that by solving one giant issue. There's always going to be more work to do, and that's exactly what The Legend of Korra portrays. My biggest issue in general was just the fact that the last season felt so underwhelming. Like, the series really didn't build to one big thing, technically. It's not like she dealt with tiny conflicts and then had her biggest one. If anything, I feel like the threats in the earlier seasons were bigger. But I give it kudos for just taking a unique approach to it, and like I said, it makes the most sense with the production. I'm glad we got to see an Avatar series where the Avatar was just the Avatar solving the problems of the world, and Korra did that really well. Now, let's talk about the shipping. Okay guys, like most shows, the romantic relationships were kind of a mess. The series started with the very obvious love interest of Korra and Mako, and that made sense when it was just one season. They got their kiss at the end, it was perfect. But then the series kept going. We got hints of Mako and Asami rekindling what they had, and then eventually, Korra and Asami. And I'm not gonna lie, as cool as this was as representation and how exciting it was, especially for the time, when I first watched it I was like, really? Okay. That's because we just saw so many weird different variations of the relationship between these 3 characters, and it just kind of felt thrown in at the end to me. But what I didn't realize, and what I definitely should have, is that this was not their goal. Korra and Asami as a couple were crippled by the network, because representation like this isn't easy at all, and usually there's a lot of problems with the network and the higher-ups. Korra and Asami in particular were basically crippled by the network, leading to them not being able to have the full impact that they deserved. It wasn't just tossed together at the end. If anything, the crew fought hard to get this much in at all. And no matter what, there's still an abundance of hints throughout book 4 leading to that final moment. I'm sure there's so many more stories they wanted to tell like this that they just couldn't, and I'm hoping if Avatar gets another series, maybe they can go full force with it. But no matter what, you can't say the relationships in the show were a little messy. Nothing was better than Varrick and Zhu Li though. They're adorable. And finally, the biggest complaint of the show, guys, Korra herself. Korra is generally viewed as a worse protagonist than Aang. People hate her hot-headedness, her impulsive attitude. And look, Korra isn't perfect, and she's not Aang by any means, but I don't think she's a bad protagonist. Book 4 even has her arc of her recovering from PTSD. And while that doesn't excuse her faults, it's undeniable that it was an accumulation of her faults. Korra has never gotten off scot-free. Everything she's done that she's been criticized for has had a consequence at some point. I think it's because we were so used to seeing a humble avatar, and Korra was just straight up cocky. I mean, Aang literally ran away from the responsibilities of being the Avatar, but Korra ran straight to them. She's the opposite of Aang on purpose. Personally, I think this is a really cool direction that they took the series in. I wouldn't want another Aang-like Avatar being like, oh, peace on Earth. We've seen that before. And it's not like just because she had confidence, they made her impenetrable. If anything, her cockiness and her confidence led to some of her biggest mistakes. Some people tried to pull the Mary Sue card, and that's literally so stupid. Why would you want to see her learn to bend the first 3 elements? We already saw that. It would be boring. Korra didn't repeat anything we saw in the original series. Aang's whole journey was becoming the Avatar. Korra's journey was her as the Avatar. And that's pretty interesting. In fact, I feel like she's dealt with bigger problems than most Avatars have, especially since she was the Avatar in basically a brand new world that was changing faster and faster every day. My biggest gripe is the fact that she literally lost connections to all of the past Avatars and they never brought it up again. That makes me so mad. I hate that. But you can't dwell on your mistakes and you gotta keep moving forward. That's exactly what Korra did. Korra is straight up unlikable sometimes, but it's never unenjoyable. intentional. She's a flawed character, and I think that's exactly how it should be. All in all, I think Korra was a pretty great Avatar, and that The Legend of Korra was a pretty great Avatar series. It's not perfect by any means, but I think the original Last Airbender has a lot going for it in terms of nostalgia. I mean, I know I personally am willing to forgive it in a lot of places because I love it so much and I grew up with it. Korra is fresh and new, which means it's open to a lot more criticism. Not to mention the fact that it's just so daunting to create a sequel series to something that was so perfect and beloved. But I think they did a great job overall. So is The Legend of Korra that bad? That's up for you to decide, but you should definitely give it a watch. That being said, I want to know what you guys think about all of this. Do you agree with what we said? Do you have other criticisms? Let us know in those comments down below. Tweet to us at Roundtable Vids or me and it's Retro Nemo. As always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the Roundtable for more incredible cartoon content. As always, guys, I'm Nemo. This is a Legend of Korra video, and I will see you next time. Peace.